When I traded my farm for city life, my son's wife looked me straight in the eye and said, "We don't want someone filthy living with us." Her words hung in the air like the smell of bleach in a hospital corridor, sharp, sterile, and meant to erase something human. My son Nathan didn't say a word. He just shifted in his seat, pretending to read a message on his phone. I smiled. Not because I found it funny, but because I knew that smile was the only dignity I had left in that moment. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story of mine has traveled." The apartment smelled nothing like home. The air was heavy with perfume and cleaning chemicals instead of fresh hay and morning dew. Back on the farm, I used to wake up to the soft clucking of chickens and the sound of the wind brushing through the cornfields. Now all I could hear were car horns and the hum of the city below. It had been 2 weeks since I sold the farm. 40 years of my life, gone with a single signature. The farmhouse Nathan was born in, where I buried his father behind the old maple tree, now belonged to a stranger with shiny shoes and soft hands. I'd sold it because Nathan said, "Mom, it's not safe out there alone. You'll be happier here with us." He'd smiled when he said it and I believed him. Maybe I wanted to believe that after all those years of raising him alone, I finally had a place to rest. But from the very first night I knew I'd made a mistake. Dinner that evening felt like an interview I hadn't been invited to. Every clink of my fork on the porcelain plate sounded too loud. Lydia, my daughter-in-law, sat across from me, scrolling through her phone between bites of salad. Nathan talked about his job, about the new condo investment, about things that didn't include me. When I asked, "How was your day, dear?" Lydia looked up, smiled without warmth and said, "Busy. You wouldn't understand city work." I laughed softly, more to myself than to her. For 40 years I'd run a farm that fed 3 counties. I'd fixed broken fences in the snow, delivered calves in the dark and balanced the books by hand. But no, I wouldn't understand city work. That night I sat on the small couch they'd placed in the spare room. The walls were painted white, too white, the kind of white that erases warmth. There was no photo of Nathan as a boy, no trace of our family's past. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint echo of laughter from the master bedroom. I stared at my suitcase, still half unpacked. Lydia had said, "Don't bother with too much stuff, the room's small." So I hadn't. I brought a few blouses, some old letters from my husband and a framed photo of the farm, the one taken the summer Nathan graduated high school. He used to say, "Mom, one day I'll build you a house in the city so you'll never have to worry again." And he did build a house. He just forgot to make room for me inside it. The next morning I woke up early out of habit. Old bones don't sleep in. I made coffee before anyone else was awake, careful not to use Lydia's expensive espresso machine. I found an old kettle in the back of a cabinet and boiled water on the stove, the way I always had. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, a small piece of home in a foreign land. Nathan walked in, adjusting his tie, and said, "Mom, Lydia doesn't like strong smells in the morning." I nodded. "I'll open a window." He smiled distractedly and left without another word. The sound of the front door closing was louder than it should have been. Later that day, Lydia appeared in the doorway holding a spray bottle and a box of wipes. "I cleaned the counter, but could you maybe use gloves next time? City hygiene is different, you know." I just looked at her, wondering when kindness had become conditional. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes said something else. "You don't belong here." I spent the rest of the day sitting by the window watching the traffic. People rushing, horns blaring, everyone too busy to look up. In the distance I could almost smell the farm, rain-soaked earth, the sweetness of alfalfa, the sun on my face. For a moment I almost forgot I was in a place where even my presence felt like dirt on a clean floor. That night I folded my hands and whispered to the empty room. I gave up everything to be closer to family. But maybe some families only love you from a distance. The city lights flickered through the blinds, cold and artificial. I closed my eyes and thought of home, the real one, where the stars didn't need permission to shine. The days began to blend together after that first week. The city moved fast, but my life inside that apartment slowed to a crawl. Lydia worked from home most days, her voice sharp and efficient as she clicked through endless meetings. I learned to keep quiet, to move softly as if the floors might creak too loudly and disturb her. Every morning I made my coffee in the old kettle, the only thing that still felt like mine. The window beside the stove faced another building, gray brick, no sky. Back on the farm, mornings smelled like wet grass and promise. Here it just smelled like bleach and exhaust. Nathan came home later and later, always with the same words, "Work's been crazy, Mom." He said it without looking at me, kissing Lydia on the forehead before disappearing into their room. The door would click shut and the sound would echo through the walls like a reminder. I wasn't part of their life, I was just occupying a corner of it. Sometimes I tried to make small talk during dinner. "How was your day, sweetheart?" Lydia smiled, the kind that shows no teeth. "Productive. Just make sure not to leave your shoes by the door, okay? The neighbors notice things." I nodded, pretending I understood what kind of things she meant. After dinner I washed the dishes. She never asked me to, but she didn't stop me either. I'd always believed small acts of service kept families close. But each plate I scrubbed felt like erasing myself a little more. One evening while taking out the trash I overheard Lydia on the phone. Her tone was light, casual. "She's still here," she said, laughing softly. "Yeah, the farm money cleared. We'll use it for the down payment next week. No, she doesn't ask questions." I froze in the hallway. The farm money. My hands trembled, but I kept walking, setting the trash bag by the door. When I came back in, she smiled at me as if nothing had happened. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, counting the faint shadows from the streetlight outside. Maybe I'd misheard her. Maybe she meant something else. But deep down I knew. That sale, everything I'd saved from a lifetime of early mornings and calloused hands, was already being spent. I missed the sound of crickets, the way the stars used to crowd the sky. In the city the dark felt heavier, emptier. I used to think loneliness was just about being alone, but it isn't. It's sitting in a room full of people and realizing no one wants to see you. The next morning, Lydia left early for a meeting. Nathan sat at the table, scrolling on his phone. "Son," I began, keeping my voice steady, "do you know what happened with the farm money?" He didn't look up. "It's fine, Mom. Lydia's helping manage things. She's good with numbers." "I never saw the final papers," I said quietly. He sighed, irritated. "Mom, you sold it. You said you didn't want to deal with that stress anymore." I wanted to tell him that wasn't true, that I only sold it because he asked me to. But the words caught in my throat. He grabbed his briefcase and kissed the top of my head, the way he used to when he was a teenager rushing to school. "Don't worry about money, Mom. We've got it handled." Then he was gone. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't just quiet. It was hollow, echoing through the tiny apartment like a truth I didn't want to face. I sat by the window again, clutching the old photo of the farm. The fields stretched wide and golden behind my husband's smile. I could almost hear his voice in the wind that wasn't there. "You always take care of them, Myrtle. Even when they don't deserve it." I closed my eyes and whispered, "Maybe this time I need to take care of myself." Outside the city roared on, cars, horns, strangers. Inside I made my coffee just the way I liked it. And for the first time since moving here I didn't open the window. A week later the apartment felt smaller. The walls seemed closer, the air heavier. Lydia had started reorganizing the place, her word for moving my things out of sight. The framed photo of the farm disappeared from the kitchen shelf. When I asked where it went, she said, "It didn't match the decor, Mom. I'll keep it safe for you." I didn't argue. I just nodded, even as something inside me sank a little lower. That Sunday Nathan suggested brunch downtown. "We should get some fresh air," he said, though he never looked at me when he said it. Lydia smiled, already dressed in a new coat. I wore my best cardigan, the same one I'd knitted myself years ago. As we sat in the bright, crowded cafe, I tried to keep up with their talk about business meetings, investments, and real estate. I nodded when they mentioned closing deals, but my thoughts were somewhere else. Back on the farm porch where coffee was free and the morning breeze was enough. When the check came, I reached into my purse. Lydia stopped me. "Oh no, please," she said sweetly. "Your money's better saved for, little things." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Nathan chuckled awkwardly. "She's right, Mom. You should relax and let us handle everything now." The way he said handle made me uneasy. I forced a smile anyway. That night I overheard another conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Lydia's voice came from their room, muffled but sharp. "She's slowing everything down. We can't finalize the condo papers until she signs the release. Nathan said something I couldn't make out. Then Lydia snapped, she'll sign. She always does. My chest tightened. I thought about the papers they'd asked me to sign last month. Just some formalities for the sale, Nathan had said. I hadn't read them carefully. I trusted my son. I always had. But now trust felt like a heavy stone I'd swallowed long ago, sitting cold in my stomach. The next morning I searched quietly through the drawers in my small room. The copy of the sale documents I'd kept was gone. So was the envelope with the last deposit receipt from the bank. When I asked Lydia, she didn't even look up from her laptop. Oh, I moved them. You had them in the wrong folder. I'm keeping everything organized. He smiled again, thin, professional, rehearsed. Later, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty spot where my photo had been. The sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, striping the floor like prison bars. I thought of my husband again, how he used to tell me, "You can plant something anywhere, Myrtle. Even in hard ground. But some places don't grow anything no matter how much care you give." That evening Lydia came home with shopping bags, designer ones. She hummed as she unpacked new clothes and a sleek laptop. Nathan followed behind, silent, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to ask where the money came from, but I already knew. The sound of their laughter filled the living room, light and hollow. I went to my room early and locked the door, not because I was afraid of them but because I needed to hear my own silence again. In the drawer beside the bed I found an old checkbook from the farm's account. Most of it was gone, but one blank check remained. I held it between my fingers, tracing the faded edges. Maybe I'd been too trusting. Maybe love had made me blind. But I wasn't finished yet. I folded the check, placed it in an envelope and wrote one word on the front: proof. I didn't know exactly what I'd do next, but I knew this. They thought I was done fighting. They were wrong. That night I couldn't sleep. The city outside buzzed with traffic and sirens, but inside the apartment was quiet, too quiet. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the years that brought me here. Every wrinkle on my hands held a piece of the past. Blisters from planting corn, small burns from the old stove, faint scars that had healed long before I ever learned how betrayal leaves no visible marks. I thought of the farm. The way it smelled after rain. The evenings when my husband, Harold, and I would sit on the porch swing, sharing coffee as the sun melted into the fields. He used to tell me, "City people talk fancy but they don't know real work, Myrtle. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." Back then we didn't have much, just land, livestock, and each other. We worked sunrise to sunset, building everything from scratch. When Nathan was born we promised he'd never have to live as hard as we did. I guess that was our first mistake. We made life too easy for him to understand gratitude. I sold that farm for him. 40 acres of soil and sweat, traded for concrete and polished marble. I told myself it was worth it so he could have comfort, safety, family. But now, sitting in this apartment that didn't feel like mine, I realized I'd given up more than land. I'd given up roots. When Harold died I kept the farm running for another decade. I woke before dawn, fed the animals, fixed fences, paid bills. I remember standing in the empty barn once, whispering, "I can't do this forever." The echo that came back was my only answer. That's when Nathan started calling, saying, "Mom, sell the place. Move here with us. It'll be easier." Thought it was love. Now I see it was convenience. The papers I signed, what if they weren't just about the farm sale? What if Lydia had slipped in something else? The thought made my stomach twist. I remembered how she'd been so helpful, printing forms, guiding me where to sign. "Just initials here, Mom," she'd said with that bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. I should have read every line. Harold would have told me to. I was tired. Tired of loneliness. Tired of silence echoing through an empty farmhouse. So I trusted my son's wife. That's on me. The next morning I brewed my coffee and sat by the window again. Across the street, a young mother was walking her little boy to school. He held her hand, skipping every other step. Watching them hurt more than I expected. I wondered if Nathan ever remembered me walking him to the bus stop in the snow, stuffing a sandwich in his pocket, just in case. He used to look back and wave until the bus turned the corner. Now he barely looked at me at all. The kettle whistled softly, pulling me back. I poured the coffee and held it close, the steam warming my face. I whispered to Harold's photo on the nightstand, "You were right, love. They don't know real work. And they don't know real love either. I took the envelope with the word proof written on it and slipped it into my purse. I didn't know where I'd go yet, but I knew one thing. If they were willing to steal from me once, they'd try again. This time I'd be ready. I'd learned long ago that you don't need a weapon to fight. You just need to wait for the right moment to strike quietly, like the frost that comes overnight and takes everything by surprise. As the city woke up outside, I buttoned my cardigan and smiled to myself. They thought I was just an old woman clinging to memories. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The following week, the doorbell rang just after noon. Lydia was out at some networking brunch, and Nathan hadn't come home the night before. I almost didn't open it, expecting another delivery for her online shopping. But when I did, a familiar face stood there. Mrs. Thompson, our old neighbor from the farm. She was holding a paper bag and smiling, her cheeks red from the cold. "I was in town visiting my sister," she said. "Thought I'd check on you, Myrtle." For the first time in months, my heart lifted. I invited her in, poured 2 cups of coffee, the strong kind Lydia hated. We sat by the window, steam curling between us like the old days. "You don't look happy here," she said gently, scanning the spotless living room. "I can tell. You've got that same look your husband had when the drought hit, tired but pretending not to be." I tried to smile. "It's just different. City life isn't for me, I guess." Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly. "I saw the papers about your sale. Big money for that land. I hope you got a fair deal." My hand froze around the coffee cup. "What papers?" She frowned. "Oh, it was in the local Gazette. Said the property was sold to a development company. But it listed Lydia's name as the seller. I figured you two worked it out together." My chest went cold. Lydia's name. Not mine. I forced a calm breath. "Do you happen to have that article?" She dug into her bag and pulled out a folded newspaper. There it was in black and white. Property sold by Lydia Price, co-owner, to Urban Ridge Homes. Co-owner. My husband and I had never added her name to anything. Mrs. Thompson must have seen the color drain from my face. "Myrtle, are you all right?" I nodded slowly, but my hands shook as I folded the paper. "Yes, dear. Just a bit lightheaded." She patted my arm. "You've always been strong. Don't let anyone take that from you." After she left, I sat alone at the table, the paper spread before me. The letters blurred, swimming through tears I didn't let fall. The article confirmed what I'd begun to fear. Lydia had manipulated everything. My son might not even know how deep it went. For a long while I just stared at the words co-owner and sale finalized. Each line felt like another shovel of dirt burying the years Harold and I had built together. Then something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to sit quietly while they turned my life's work into their stepping stone. I took out the envelope marked proof. Inside was that blank check, but I added the newspaper clipping beside it. Then I found a notepad and began writing down every detail I remembered. Dates, bank names, the lawyer Nathan mentioned, even the phrases Lydia had used. Formalities, paperwork, signatures. Every small thing could matter. That evening when Nathan came home, I asked if he'd join me for tea. He looked surprised but agreed. As I poured his cup, I said softly, "I had a visit today. From Mrs. Thompson." He smiled faintly. "Oh, how's the farm?" "Gone," I said. "And apparently I wasn't the one who sold it." His smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I met his eyes. "It's in the papers, Nathan. Lydia's name is on the deed." He set his cup down too fast. "There must be a mistake." "Maybe," I said. "But it's time we both start looking at what kind of mistakes we've been living with." For the first time he couldn't look at me. His silence said more than any apology could. After he left the table, I whispered into the quiet, "You raised him to be honest, Harold. Maybe he'll remember that before it's too late." Outside, the city lights blinked against the window. But for the first time I didn't feel small beneath them. I felt awake. Nathan avoided me for the next few days. I could feel it in the way he hurried out in the mornings, in the way his "Good night, Mom" echoed from the hallway instead of my doorway. Lydia, on the other hand, seemed lighter, almost triumphant. She hummed while she made coffee, left shopping bags all over the living room, and smiled like a cat that had just swallowed the last canary. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Something inside me had shifted. Anger wastes energy, silence collects it. And I was collecting plenty. I started keeping a small notebook in my purse, writing down every odd thing that happened. The phone calls Lydia took in another room. The visits from the realtor who never met my eyes. The bank envelopes that arrived addressed to her, not Nathan. Every note was another thread in a web I was beginning to see clearly. One afternoon I waited until they both left for work. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I walked into their office, a room Lydia had claimed as her workspace. The desk was immaculate but the trash bin wasn't. I pulled out a few crumpled papers and found a printed email chain. Subject: Final transfer approval. Attached: Notarized deed co-owner authorization. The signature at the bottom wasn't mine. It was my name but not my handwriting. My breath caught. I sat there staring at it, the words blurring on the page. My hands shook but I didn't cry. I'd shed enough tears for one lifetime. I just folded the paper neatly and slipped it into my notebook. Proof. That evening I acted as if nothing had changed. I asked about their day. I offered to cook dinner. Lydia declined, saying she'd ordered sushi instead. You wouldn't like it, Mom, it's raw. She laughed but I only smiled. So are you, I thought. Cold and raw. After dinner, Nathan came to my door, guilt flickering behind his eyes. Mom, I looked into the papers. Lydia said you signed a power of attorney last spring. Do you remember? I remember trusting her, I said. Is that what you mean? He hesitated. She was just trying to help. Help herself, maybe. My voice was calm. Did you ever read what you were signing either, Nathan? He didn't answer. He just rubbed his forehead and left. I watched his back disappear down the hallway and for the first time I felt pity, not for me but for him. He'd lost something money couldn't buy, the ability to tell right from wrong. Later that night I called Mrs. Thompson. My voice trembled just a little when I asked if she still had the number of the lawyer who handled her husband's estate. She did. I wrote it down carefully. Before going to bed I placed my notebook, the forged document, and the clipping in a shoebox under my bed. Then I whispered into the dark, "You taught me patience, Harold. Looks like I'll need a bit more." The city lights flickered outside the window, reflecting off the glass like watchful eyes. I didn't feel afraid. I felt steady. Lydia thought she'd buried me under her lies. But I'd been buried before, in grief, in silence, in loneliness, and somehow, I always found my way back to the light. This time would be no different. The next morning I woke earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet cleared the rooftops and the city was still half asleep. I made my coffee quietly, the old kettle whistling like a memory. My hands didn't tremble anymore. Every move felt deliberate, steady, measured. By 9 o'clock I had the lawyer's number in my hand. Mrs. Thompson's friend, a man named Robert Hale, answered on the second ring. His voice was low, patient, the kind that belonged to someone who'd seen too many families torn apart by greed. "I just need to know," I said. "If someone forged my signature on a property sale, what can I do?" He asked for the details. I told him everything, from the sale of the farm to Lydia's name on the papers. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, then said, "If what you're saying is true, Mrs. Price, this is fraud. But we'll need copies of every document." "I have them," I said. "And I'm keeping notes." "Good," he said. "Don't let them know you found out. I'll send someone to collect the evidence discreetly." When I hung up, I sat back in the chair and exhaled. For the first time since moving to the city, I felt like I had ground under my feet again. Lydia came home that evening, smiling as usual. She placed a shopping bag on the counter and said, "I bought you some lotion, Mom. For your hands, they're so dry." Her voice was honey, but her eyes were steel. "Thank you," I said, tucking the bottle away. I didn't need her gifts. I needed time. Nathan arrived later, looking worn out. He barely spoke through dinner. Lydia filled the silence with stories about her new business venture, something about luxury staging. I listened carefully. She used the word investment too many times. When they left the table, I cleared the dishes as always. But this time I slipped one of her business cards from the counter into my apron pocket. Every small thing mattered now. The next afternoon, a man in a gray suit arrived while Lydia was at work. "I'm Mr. Hale's assistant," he said quietly, showing me his ID. I handed him the shoebox with the notebook, the forged signature, and the newspaper clipping. He nodded. "We'll handle the rest discreetly. You'll hear from us soon." After he left, I stood by the window staring at the reflection of my face in the glass. For months, that reflection had looked small and tired. Now it looked calm. Certain. That night, Nathan knocked on my door again. "Mom, I talked to Lydia. She said the lawyer you mentioned called the office asking questions. Did you contact anyone?" I met his gaze. Yes. I needed to. His shoulders tensed. "You should have come to me first." "I did," I said softly. "You just didn't hear me." He looked away, jaw tight. "Lydia's upset. She says you're confused, mixing things up." "Then she should be calm," I replied. "Truth doesn't scare honest people." He didn't answer. The silence between us stretched, heavy but honest. For the first time, he didn't defend her. When he left, I turned off the light and sat in the dark. Outside, the city glowed, thousands of windows lit up like scattered stars. Somewhere out there, people still believed family meant safety. I once did too. But tonight, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. The kind of awake that comes before dawn, when the world is still holding its breath, waiting for something to change. And change was coming. 2 days later, the phone rang while Lydia was out. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was another telemarketer. But when I heard the calm voice on the other end say, "Mrs. Price, this is Robert Hale," my heart steadied. "We've reviewed the documents," he said. "Your signature was forged. The notary stamp was falsified, and the funds from the sale were redirected to an account under your daughter-in-law's name." I didn't speak for a moment. I just looked out the window at the city that had never felt like home. "Can it be fixed?" I asked. "It can," he said. "But it will take time. We'll file a report and freeze the assets before they disappear. Are you safe where you are?" I smiled faintly. Safer than I've been in a long time. That afternoon, Lydia came home humming, her purse full of new receipts. She didn't notice the quiet stiffness in the air. She poured herself a glass of wine and said, "We should celebrate, Nathan's promotion just came through." I nodded, setting the table as usual. "That's nice. We should all toast tonight." She smiled, unaware. Her laughter filled the kitchen as I served dinner, but my mind was elsewhere. On the documents Mr. Hale now held, on the frozen accounts she didn't yet know about, on the storm she'd created without realizing it was already circling back. Nathan came home late, looking uneasy. "Mom, we need to talk," he said softly, glancing toward Lydia, who was still scrolling on her phone. "The bank called. They said something about an investigation." Lydia's head snapped up. "What investigation?" I looked at her, calm and steady. "Maybe they're finally checking whose money was really in those accounts." Her face drained of color. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," I said. "I'm just telling the truth." For a long moment none of us spoke. The city noise outside faded, and all that remained was the ticking of the kitchen clock. "Lydia ist zu de Propsli, grabbing herbake. You've made a huge mistake, old woman." I smiled. "No, dear. I've just corrected one." The door slammed behind her and Nathan sat down, his face pale, his hands trembling. He whispered, "Mom, what did you do?" "Something I should have done months ago," I said quietly. "I stopped letting people write my story for me." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The city lights flickered. And for the first time since I'd left the farm, I felt the air shift. Like the moment before rain when the world finally decides to cleanse itself. The morning after the confrontation, the apartment felt different. Lighter somehow. Lydia hadn't come home that night. Her closet door stood open, half empty. Nathan sat at the table, staring into a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. "She packed a suitcase," he said quietly. "Didn't even tell me where she was going." I folded my hands, watching the steam rise from my own cup. Sometimes when people build their lives on lies, they have to run before the truth catches up. He looked up, eyes tired. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear. She handled everything, the lawyers, the bank. I thought she was helping you." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I never blamed you. But now you know the cost of not paying attention." He nodded, ashamed. For a while we sat in silence. Outside, the rain finally came, washing the city in gray streaks. I thought of the fields back home, how the earth used to drink the rain like forgiveness. Later that day, Mr. Hale called again. "The accounts have been frozen. We've traced the transfers. She can't touch a dime." I thanked him, my voice steady. When I hung up, I turned to Nathan. It's over, I said. The farm's name is clear. Your father's work won't vanish into someone else's greed. He rubbed his eyes, trying to hold back tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not yet, I replied. But forgiveness isn't for you. It's for me. That evening I walked out to the small balcony. The rain had stopped and the air smelled clean for once. Down below, lights flickered on across the city. Thousands of windows, each holding a story. For months I had felt trapped here like an outsider. But standing there now, I realized something. I didn't need this place to feel alive. I thought of Harold again. His hands, his laugh, the porch swing creaking under us as he'd say, "You can lose land, Myrtle, but never lose your ground." I smiled. I didn't, Harold. Not this time. Behind me, Nathan stepped out, his voice small. "What will you do now?" I looked out at the skyline, the fading sun painting everything gold. "Go home," I said simply. "There's still work to be done." And for the first time in a long while, I meant it. 2 weeks later, the storm finally broke. The investigation wrapped up faster than I expected. The forged documents, the hidden accounts, every thread pointed back to Lydia. Mr. Hale said she'd tried to withdraw the remaining balance from a shell account, but the bank flagged it before she could move a dollar. "She's facing charges," he told me. "You'll get your funds restored, Mrs. Price." I thanked him, though the money didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the truth had a voice again. Mine. That evening, Nathan came into my room holding a small box. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a silver locket, Harold's gift to me on our 25th anniversary. Lydia had taken it months ago, claiming it was too old-fashioned to wear. "I found it in her drawer," Nathan said. "I'm sorry, Mom." I touched the locket gently. "You can't fix what she broke, son. But you can learn from it." He nodded, his eyes wet. "I want to make things right. I can sell the condo, pay you back." I stopped him with a small wave of my hand. "No. Keep it. Build something honest this time." He looked confused. "You're leaving, aren't you?" "Yes," I said. "The city isn't home. It never was." The next morning I packed my suitcase, the same one I'd carried when I left the farm. Only this time it wasn't full of regret. Just clothes, a few letters, and the locket resting on top. Nathan offered to drive me to the bus station, but I declined. "I need to leave the way I came," I told him. "On my own 2 feet." He hugged me at the door, his voice cracking. "I'll visit, Mom. I promise." I smiled faintly. Promises are easy, Nathan. Keeping them is the real work. As I stepped outside, the cold wind brushed my face. The city around me buzzed with life. Taxis, voices, neon lights. But none of it reached me. I walked slowly toward the corner, suitcase rolling behind me, my heart lighter with every step. At the stoplight, I looked up at the skyline one last time. So tall, so bright, yet so hollow. I whispered to myself, they mistook my silence for weakness. They forgot silence can be sharper than any knife. When the light turned green, I crossed the street, heading not just away from them but back toward myself. The bus ride back to my hometown took nearly 6 hours. The further we drove, the more the skyline faded behind me until it was nothing but a blur of gray and glass. I watched it disappear through the window, feeling neither loss nor anger, just a quiet sort of peace. The kind that comes when something broken finally stops making noise. When the bus turned onto the familiar country road, my chest tightened. The fields stretched out endlessly just as I remembered. Bare now, waiting for spring. Even in their emptiness, they looked alive. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the smell of real earth, damp, honest, and forgiving. Mrs. Thompson was waiting at the old cafe by the bus stop. She waved when she saw me, her smile wide and kind. "You came home," she said, hugging me tight. "I did," I whispered. "Guess the city wasn't made for people who still believe in decency." She chuckled softly. "No place is, Myrtle. You just have to plant it where you stand." We sat for an hour, sipping coffee that tasted the way mornings used to. I told her everything. How Lydia had forged my name, how Nathan had finally opened his eyes, how justice found its way back to the right hands. She listened without interrupting, just nodding with that knowing look country women have when they recognize both heartbreak and victory. "You always were tougher than you looked," she said. "So what now?" "I'm buying back a small piece of the land," I said. "Not all of it, Just enough for a house and a garden. Something that's mine again. He grinned. That sounds just right. That evening I walked along the dirt road leading to where the farmhouse used to stand. The new owners had torn it down, built something modern in its place. I didn't stop there. I kept walking until I reached the old maple tree. Harold's grave marker still stood beneath it, weathered but strong. I knelt down, brushing the dirt from his name. "It's done," I whispered. "You'd be proud of me." I didn't yell. I didn't fight dirty. I just waited, and the truth did the rest. The wind picked up, rustling the branches overhead. For a moment I could almost hear him laughing softly, saying, "Told you, Myrtle. You don't have to shout to be heard." I smiled through tears I didn't bother to wipe away. The sky was deep orange, the kind of sunset the city never gets right. And for the first time in years I felt home again. Not because of the land, but because I'd finally found my peace. A month passed before I realized how quiet peace really sounds. Out here, the mornings didn't start with sirens or honking cars. They began with bird song and the low hum of the wind through the grass. My little cottage stood on a corner of the old farm, rebuilt with the settlement money Mr. Hale helped me recover. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough for a porch, a rocking chair, and a patch of soil that was truly mine again. Every sunrise felt like an apology from life itself. I'd sit with my coffee, the same chipped mug from years ago, and watch the mist lift off the fields. The air carried that earthy scent of renewal, the one thing the city could never imitate. Nathan called once a week now. His voice always careful, soft, like a man learning how to be a son again. "Mom, how's the new place?" he'd ask. "Quiet," I'd tell him. "You'd like it if you ever learned how to listen." He always promised to visit. I didn't press him. Some lessons take time. Lydia never called. She'd left the city after the investigation, and I never asked where she went. Some ghosts are best left wandering. One afternoon, I planted a row of wildflowers near the old maple tree where Harold rested. The ground was cool beneath my hands, the way it used to be when we planted together. As I pressed the seeds into the soil, I whispered, "You were right, Harold. Roots only matter if they grow from truth." The wind rustled through the branches, carrying the faint scent of rain. I looked up and smiled. For so long I'd been afraid that growing old meant being forgotten. But standing there, surrounded by open sky and honest earth, I knew better. Getting older doesn't mean fading away. It means seeing everything more clearly. I dusted off my hands and sat on the porch, the horizon glowing gold as the sun began to set. The same kind of sunset that once marked the end of long workdays and the beginning of quiet evenings. I thought about that night in the city when Lydia called me filthy. Back then I'd smiled out of humiliation. But now when I smiled, it came from strength. The city lights never felt like home. Here under this sky I didn't need lights to see. I closed my eyes, listening to the crickets and the whispering trees. Some stories don't end in anger. They end in peace, and that, I finally learned, is the best kind of revenge.